you know things are bad inside Russia when Russians start complaining themselves, because the media is very tightly controlled and they get in trouble for that. But there are countless videos that have been posted of Russians in supermarkets complaining about prices. Sanctions really have started to kick in over the years, and they have looted their country to pay for this very expensive war. War is expensive, weapon systems are expensive, and it hits regular, everyday Russians the hardest, because the value of their money goes down every single day as the banks get looted.
Russia doesn't look like a country that's winning. It looks like a country slowly breaking under the weight of war. And that's where many of these sudden hysterias online and in propaganda are coming from. Russia is still dangerous, but is no longer stable. This is what an exhausted empire looks like: aggression on the outside, fracture on the inside. So what's really happening inside Russia? And why does a state that claims strength sound increasingly desperate? Let's talk about this with Irish journalist and documentary filmmaker Caolan Robertson. Caolan, welcome, and I hope to see you again here. Welcome back.
It's so good to be back in Ukraine. I missed it so much.
Yeah, we're going to talk about where have you been for such a long time. But before that, I'm opening social media, X, propaganda, and it's definitely super visible that Russia is becoming hysterical. From your perspective, that are unfortunately following very closely Russian propaganda, you have to do that. Why they're so hysterical right now?
Well, when Russia starts losing economically and militarily, they start making the loudest noise. They start freaking out. And that comes in the form of propaganda on your newsfeed. It comes with lies. And the first lie that they put out, and they've been doing this since 2022, but more in the last month because they've been losing ground very, very recently, is that Ukraine is sinful, Ukraine is demonic, Ukraine isn't a Christian country, or Ukraine is somehow degenerate. They've been saying, again, these lies about how Ukraine is throwing priests in prison. By the way, that is immediately debunked. If you look at any of the videos of the Russian Orthodox Church in Moscow, in the Kremlin, in Russia, it looks like a military parade. It's priests running around with shotguns, with rifles, doing military parades. And that's because the Russian church that existed here was basically a military base. And it would be the equivalent of the United States having Soviet military bases inside the US soil during the Cold War. This is how ridiculous this would be. So these churches were raided because they were spying. They were spying on Ukrainians, and they were spying on the government here, and they were military bases. Every single one of those priests were fake priests. And again, if you look at videos of them in Russia, they are combatants. They are military combatants, and it is ridiculous, would be ridiculous for any country to allow military combatants for the invader to be on their soil, and these places were everywhere. But Russia weaponized it and pretended that Ukraine were targeting priests. And now you've got agitators with millions of followers in the last few days coming out and repeating this lie again, that this country are throwing priests in prison. By the way, if you want to look at what country is actually targeting Christianity, it's the country that is bombing churches every single day. If you look at the churches in this country, over 1,400 religious sites have been damaged or destroyed by Russia. Priests were tortured in Kherson. That is the country that is targeting churches and priests. But these people aren't interested in priests or churches. They're interested in repeating Kremlin lies. In Kremlin propaganda, it's what they do because they're paid to do it or because it gets clicks, and it's reprehensible. But again, one country is targeting churches, and that is Russia by bombing them. One country is doing counterintelligence raids, and Russia's pretending like it's some sort of holy war.
Yeah, but they are selling quite a different story to the West regarding churches, not telling everything that you mentioned right now.
Well, yeah.
They are telling about the Ukrainians, but not the part.
Yeah, because it's to pretend that Ukraine is like sinful and demonic. It's to pretend that Ukraine is somehow, degenerate, evil, and to sell that to evangelicals in America. Again, it's why so much of this misinformation is coming out in the United States. But again, this flies in the face of facts. If you want to talk about degeneracy, Russia has the highest HIV rates. Russia has the highest divorce rates. Russia has the highest abortion rates. Russia has the highest domestic abuse rates in the developed world. And calling Russia developed is being very polite to Russia. So, this is ridiculous propaganda. It's been going on for so long, but now it's happening more than ever because this country has gained more ground since 2023 against the Russians because their communications are down. So it's lashing out, thrashing out, and we'll be seeing a lot more of this as Russia collapses economically and militarily.
Actually, speaking about Russia collapsing economically, I know that you saw the news that about 40% of income Russians are right now spending on goods. And me as a Ukrainian, I'm not spending 4% of my salary, 40%, I'm sorry. So what does it tell us? That Russia is very effectively hiding the truth from the world, that it's cracking, it's collapsing. Cafeterias are closing. And I saw the reports that people who were owning a business, like a small business, they're all complaining that everything is falling apart. I don't feel any sorry for them. I'm just trying to understand how effectively Russia is hiding the truth from the West.
Oh, Russia are trying to hide this right now. That's why they're banning Telegram, they're banning news sites, and next they're going to be banning VPNs. And what they're trying to hide is what you're talking about. It's the fact that 500 restaurants have closed in Moscow alone. It's the fact that food prices are up more than they've been in the last 16 years, up 40% because of massive inflation, because the government has looted their own country to pay for this ridiculous war. And this is going to continue endlessly. And things are bad inside Russia when Russians start complaining themselves, because the media is very tightly controlled and they get in trouble for that. But there are countless videos that have been posted of Russians in supermarkets complaining about prices, of Russians on the front lines who are fighting, complaining that they can't afford, they can't get socks anymore, they can't get goods anymore, they're not getting supplies anymore. And those issues are extremely problematic. Later, we should talk about the military issues that are happening, with the production lines of airplanes and things. But when it comes to the actual economy, it's catastrophic. And again, Russia wanted to start this war because they wanted to bring the greatness of Russia, of the motherland, back again. And they did. They brought it back to the Soviet days of breadlines. That's all they did. They didn't bring it back to anything greater than that. They didn't bring it back to their borders being aggressively expanded. They just brought it back to poverty. And we're seeing this now more than ever, again, because this war is incredibly expensive. Russia's economy is just about smaller than Italy's now. All projections show that it's going to start shrinking. Shrinkflation is happening. There are loaves of bread that used to cost a certain number of rubles, 50 rubles, something like this, that are now sold as individual slices. And TikTokers are complaining like how ridiculous it is to buy a slice of bread in the supermarket.
Is that true?
Yeah, there are countless videos of this. It's crazy. Like a individual slice. And again, corruption, supply line issues, sanctions really have started to kick in over the years, and they have looted their country to pay for this very expensive war. War is expensive, weapon systems are expensive, and it hits regular, everyday Russians the hardest because the value of their money goes down every single day as the banks get looted, as the oil companies that are owned by the government get looted. And this is what's happening. Gazprom are talking about losses. All the major oil companies are having a really bad time with this at a time that the Shadow Fleet is having major issues. And the Shadow Fleet is still sailing, unfortunately, but it's getting more expensive to operate. And they heavily rely on that for their exports. So, if you take all of these things into account, it is a catastrophic time for a regular, everyday Russian. I don't have sympathy for everyday Russians because most of them are pretty much indifferent to this war. They don't care about Ukrainians, but it's pretty fun to watch.
Caolan, you are often going to the front line and you're following the situation on the front line and battlefield, and you have a lot of contact with the soldiers. How would you describe right now the battlefield? Because Ukraine is regaining territories right now on Zaporizhia direction. How is that happening after a month of grinding war?
It's because communications are down solely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this started for two reasons. One, Russia started clamping down on information being shared. They're becoming more like North Korea, so they banned Telegram. Telegram is the main source of communication on the front lines for soldiers in Russia. The second thing that happened is that Elon Musk had a tiny flash of morality for the first time. Maybe it was a slip, maybe it wasn't. And he decided to stop supplying telecommunication systems to an invading army in Europe. And that's because A, 70% of Americans actually support Ukraine, but B, he was put under more pressure more recently online, on Twitter. So all communications are down. And now Russians are resorting to World War I style communication systems, which basically relies on digging holes in the ground, putting wires into the floor and shouting into those wires. And this is terrible for the Russians. You know, they must be devastated because what they would be doing now would be screaming, you know, blet, blet, bomb a children's hospital, raise a town to the ground. And that would happen. And now they're shouting into the void and they're not getting anywhere with it. And they must be devastated. You know, they would be very easily able to call in an airstrike on a school or on a hospital or on a village. And now they can't. So they're really struggling right now. And communications is the beginning of the collapse of a lot of different systems. And on the Ukrainian side, the Starlinks are basically whitelisted. What happened was all the satellites went dark, every single Starlink went dark, and then specific Ukrainian systems that had been told to Musk that were Ukrainians were whitelisted and allowed to go back on again. So Ukrainians can see everything. They've got eyes on the sky, and that gives them a massive advantage. The fog has cleared, the weather's warmed up, and so they can storm areas they know there are no Russians, and they can call in airstrikes in places they know there are command centers. So it's really had a huge impact. Again, like communications are like everything in war. So this is the beginning, I think, of a big Ukrainian advance. A few villages now, I think it's 70 villages, something like this, is a good start. But if this continues, it's really gonna be amazing for Ukraine. I didn't see this coming at all. Last time I was in Donbass, you know, the Russians were moving in the wrong direction. They were moving in this direction. I didn't expect this.
Then I have a follow-up question. If Russia will have to step back from their own territories, how are they gonna react, you know? I mean, not only on propaganda right now, but what actions they could take.
I don't think that Russia is going to do a massive reaction because they are distracted with Iran. Putin right now is on the phone 24/7 watching and monitoring what is happening with Iran, one of their closest allies, and they are completely distracted. And Russia really is in a difficult situation right now. And I don't think they have the ability and time to counteract this right now. I mean, if Iran falls, it's going to be even worse. But if it doesn't, it's going to be in a difficult situation. So I don't see any reaction, to be honest, right now. I think as long as there's massive destabilization in the Middle East, I think Russia's going to be pretty quiet. We're going to see a pretty quiet few days.
Russia has lost a lot of aircraft in war against Ukraine, but they cannot replace it. Why?
Corruption doesn't build fighter jets. And the supply lines that existed that built the type of planes that Russia is using to bomb this country disappeared a long time ago. Russia relies still on very old technology. The parts don't really exist anymore. And with sanctions, with corruption, with a massive labor shortage of people who would have been making these things but are now dead in the trenches and fields of Ukraine, means that it's impossible to really reopen these supply lines quickly. And Euromaidan Press reported that the A50 supply line tried to be reopened. Russia demanded that it was reopened. And Ukraine bombed it 4 times, which is pretty good. And that caused $350 million worth of damage. And it basically rendered it incapable of reopening. So, I mean, whenever Russia tries to reopen something, if they can get past the production layers, the labor shortage layers, the supply chain layers, then it would be bombed anyway. So really, they're not going to build new stuff. But the key is the mentality. Russia, when it decided to invade Ukraine in the 2022 full-scale invasion, thought that it had enough supplies in its stockpile to continue this war for at least a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years. But that stuff is really being depleted on a massive scale. And it's very hard to rebuild it in a broken country, an economically broken country. So I don't see them opening these things up anytime soon. They really want the parts. Iran aren't going to supply the parts much because it's busy.
Yeah, well, that was my next question, the situation in the Middle East. Why do you think the United States was going to isolationism now is effectively attacking Iran together with Israel? Why American president, who so desperately wanted a peace prize, so actively satisfying, enjoying with the bombing other cities?
Because Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff is in charge of peace negotiations with Iran and with Russia and Ukraine. And I just got back here to Ukraine and I watched missiles fall on Kyiv at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I turned on the news this morning and saw the Middle East on fire. And these two are put in place because they are business orientated. They are wheelers and dealers. They're basically there because Trump loves money and he grew up with people that love money. They're put in place because they're corrupt. And this is what happens when you put idiots in charge of peace negotiations. You get eruptions and fire in the Middle East. And we're going to see far more of this as long as Trump puts idiots in his cabinet. And that is literally the reason this is happening. That is why the United States is getting involved. And also that's why, Steve Witkoff, who has insisted on peace the entire time, if you look at a graph or a chart of the number of drone attacks that have landed in Kyiv since Trump took office, it's gone up tenfold since Biden took office. Peace has gotten less. Actually, things have gotten worse since these two have been put in power. And again, that's what happens when you put these people in charge. I chased Steve Witkoff down the street because I seem to be the only journalist that wanted to ask these questions about his business deals with one side. But again, you put people in charge whose job it is to make money, not have peace, you're going to get war.
You're going to get a war. How Ukraine may benefit from this?
Ukraine is going to massively benefit from what's happening. Well, there are two groups of people that are massively going to benefit from the fall of Iran, and that is the Iranian people first, who are desperate for freedom, who right now are still dancing in the streets with missiles falling behind them because they've been oppressed for so long. And the second group are Ukrainians who have watched Shahed drones. They're called Shahed because they were designed in Iran. They're still made in Russia now, but designed in Iran. And watched Iran arm and provide weapons and intel to Russia for this entire war. There's just as much of an enemy as Russia. And actually, Russia is in a terrible situation right now because they have to make two decisions. The first decision is to arm Iran and support their friend that's under attack right now. That would require sending them missiles, S-300 systems, ammo.
Do you think they're going to do that?
I don't think they're going to do that. But if they did do that, then they would be depleted more in their weapons, and that's less weapons that would be sent into this country. The second option is to just let them alone, leave them alone, and not help them at all. But that would be terrible for Russia because every other one of their friends, North Korea, all the other countries in the BRICS that thought that they would be supported by Russia, would watch and say, oh, so if we're under attack and something bad happens to us, Russia's just going to disappear. They're not going to help us. So Russia's in a terrible situation, regardless of what happens, any of those two situations. And that is fantastic for Ukraine. Any bad news for Russia is good for Ukraine. So it's going to incredibly benefit this country. And again, the Iranian people deserve their freedom. I was in Syria just after the fall of Assad, and I watched on New Year's Eve as thousands and thousands of young Syrians celebrated with fireworks in the streets after decades of dictatorship in the Assad family. And Iranians would have the same thing. And I asked some of those Syrians as well what they thought about Ukraine. And they said, well, Ukraine deserves exactly the same moment from freedom from Russia as its neighbor. And this, again, would be disastrous. This is a disastrous situation for Russia, a totally disastrous situation. And I don't care who's launching the missiles. We can talk about why Trump did this, why Israel did this. That is completely irrelevant. I want to talk about the outcomes. And the outcomes are, it's great for those two groups of people. It's great for Ukrainians and Iranians. And that is really, really important.
That's a good point, because as you said in our previous interview, Russia is losing allies. So what happened with Venezuela?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I cannot tell you that they have lost it, but they are struggling. When everything was happening in Syria, the collapse of Assad regime, Russia was giving all the weapons to Ukraine, all the resources, so they lost Syria.
They also lost Cuba as well.
They lost Cuba, and so
yeah, I mean, look at Cuba right now.
And with Iran, we'll see.
Paul Conroy just gave me an amazing article for Caolan Report with a photo essay. He's just left Cuba a few hours ago, which was amazing. He kind of snuck in. And he said, there are no more flights basically leaving that country because there's no more oil. Cuba relies on 100,000 barrels a day to just about function. They're getting 40,000. That country is about to completely collapse. There is rubbish piled in the streets. Russia aren't sending help. They're not sending convoys and oil. That sends a message to Russia's neighbors that Russia's not going to help Cuba. Russia didn't help Maduro in Venezuela. Russia kind of helped Assad by giving him a free plane ticket, but he let his country fall apart. If Iran goes, I mean, really, what is left? North Korea. And that is not even a real country. No, it's a complete joke.
Okay. Caolan, at this stage, I want to get back to from where I started, that you have been absent in Ukraine for quite a while. There was a long vacation. You've been to Asia, then you've been to another continent, you've been to Canada. And I'm curious, as a Ukrainian citizen, more than just as a journalist, what's happening with your brain when you're living in a war zone and then you're finding yourself in a peaceful situation and then rapidly the airplane is flying above your head? What was your reaction on everything was going on around you in a peaceful country, the country that you have visited while you were away?
I guess it's strange because I never really talk about my own experience on an emotional level here, because every other Ukrainian has to go through this, and much worse if you're near the front lines. But I think as an observation, I decided that my last Kherson trip was too much. There was blood in the snow. I was in a very, very dangerous place right next to the river and saw a little bit too much. You'll see it in the film. But, so I decided to go away for like 7 days in the place that could be furthest from Ukraine, just to completely reset, like a wellness place. And the first thing I noticed was when we landed, the sound of jets flying overhead in the hotel we were staying in near the airport it was strange because I knew it was a plane, but my body was like tight and like completely perplexed and like kind of shaking. And I was like, I don't know how long this is going to last. I don't know if this is going to be something forever. But I realized it's not normal. This is completely ridiculous. This is an airplane flying above. And it shows the impact that people have to live with every day to be worried about an airplane. And you see this with Ukrainians and fireworks. So that was one thing. But I went to the resort, and it's the first time I'd really been in complete silence and had an entire night where, there wasn't an air raid alert or there wasn't something happening. And I just couldn't really sleep. And I started completely freaking out, panicking, I think, after everything I saw in Syria, after really reporting here for 3 years in Donbass, in a lot of different places. It feels like it was normal to be here. It is normal to be here, and it's actually fine to be here. But leaving is almost like the most difficult part. It's almost like inside Ukraine, I feel like I'm in the eye of a tornado, and the tornado is spinning all around you. But as soon as you leave, that's when you feel all the debris and all the dust and all the dirt hit you. And it took days and days just to feel even slightly normal again. And I think that it means that I think I just need to take a lot more time to focus on, like mental health and to figure out ways to deal with actually continuing this, because I want to do this forever. Wherever Russia is causing mayhem around the world, I want to document it and show people. But I think a lot of journalists don't really deal with these things. Every journalist I know that's a really hardcore frontline journalist either does drugs or drinks alcohol. And that's really not the path I want to take. So it's been a time where I've really had to reflect and think how I can keep doing this in a way that's still normal and going to keep me sane. But again, it's strange to talk about. It's really strange because this isn't about politics and it's not about missiles or numbers or videos, but it was a really difficult, I actually found it much more difficult to be somewhere safe and quiet than be somewhere dangerous at this point. Because at least if I'm in the Donbass with friends and still talk about it, you're surrounded by people that understand the situation. Whereas somewhere so far away, people can't comprehend it. So yeah, I was just honestly every moment just wishing I could come back to Ukraine, wishing I could come back here.
Oh, Caolan, I can relate. I remember in 2022, after 6 months of war, I won the scholarship in the United Nations, in New York, in headquarters of the UN. And I remember the only thing for the 3 months that I have spent in New York, I was thinking that I would love to come back to Ukraine. I have never been to the front line as you did. And I don't think I'm that bold enough to go, but still I was kind of, already my mind was kind of I cannot say ruined, but stressed by war. So, and the only thing I was thinking to come back to Ukraine, I was in a peaceful country. I could go to the museums and see everything, and I was only thinking to get back to Ukraine. That's an interesting hook. To be honest, this morning I opened Facebook, and there is my colleague from New Voice of Ukraine, and she was commenting that this world have to be explained now, not from politicians, not political experts, but from therapists and psychiatrists. So they have to take a lead and to explain what's happening in the world right now. So it's interesting. And you know what? When you got back from the vacation, there was a massive Russian attack again. How was your brain reacting? Because as you said during the interview that you saw the missile was just flying and hit it by the air defense in Kyiv. How is that? That's very complicated.
Well, I was away for a long time as well. I was in Toronto speaking at these rallies. But again, I think coming back to Ukraine isn't because we missed war. It's because we missed being around people that understood the experience that we went through. You're here surrounded by millions of people, friends and family that went through exactly what you did. And that's the comfort you miss. Not war or missiles. That it would be strange to miss that. It's not even the ground. It's being with people who understand. I think that's what I really, really figured out. I only just realized that now, I think. But it was weird because I got back at like 7 p.m. or something like this, and finally was in the front door. My apartment overlooks beautiful Kyiv, and I could just see the skyline. I was so happy just to see this comfort. And it was weird because it woke me up and I was like, what the hell is going on? It was bizarre. I completely forgot how everything operated. I forgot how air defense worked, how drones were, how missiles were. I was trying to figure out what on earth was going on. And I can see everything. I could see all the flashes in the distance. And I remember realizing how messed up it is and how horrible it is. I mean, I got used to it, but it's really just despicable. I mean, I think that's all I was thinking, and I just couldn't sleep for the rest of the night because I was just full of adrenaline. Normally I would go straight back to sleep, but it's a weird thing to see. But it's also, I was in Davos, I was in Toronto, in safe places, I was around politicians, a lot of people who are understanding what's going on, but, they have fatigue and they're kind of tired with it. But a reminder of coming back and seeing explosions straight away in the sky, it's like the rest of the world has gone crazy, not realizing how insane this is for still carrying on every single night. Yeah, it was just a lot to kind of realize all at once as soon as I landed.
Everything you're saying, it's so meaningful. To be honest, now I understand what is happening to me as well. But with the shock, I have to admit that I could not even closely understand what's happening to the Ukrainian soldiers who are not leaving the trenches or front line for years, or so they are not in the rotation. It's also, that's a very hard topic to discuss, so we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you're back, to be honest.
I'm glad I'm back, and I'm probably not
you're
going to leave for a very long time.
I hope for that.
The country, not. I'll leave Kyiv. I'll go on trips inside Ukraine. If I need a vacation, I'll go to Odessa. I think it's going to be
not the safest place in Ukraine.
Maybe like a dacha, just a bit south.
You think the Russian drone will not find you there?
Maybe.
You know, it's very good that we're laughing still, that we have this ability to laugh, even when it's super hard around us. Thank you so much, Caolan, for your visit to War and Politics Project. I'm so happy to see you every time here and to listen to you. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you too. It's been really good to be back.